What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, and today we've got an exciting interview. Andy McCullough of The Athletic joins me to talk all sorts of things. Trevor Bauer signing, playing baseball in a pandemic, all sorts of things that we're going to get to talk with him about. So I hope you enjoy this interview, and here it is, me chatting with Andy McCullough. All right. Well, I'm excited to welcome in Andy McCullough, who is a senior writer from The Athletic, former Dodger beat writer for the LA Times. Andy, last time we spoke, it was just a few months ago. The Dodgers were not world champions. Now they are. Pitchers and catchers are already back. Is it surprising to you how quickly it feels like this offseason has gone by?
No, it didn't go quickly at all. It was miserable. What are you talking about? You try and write about baseball this past December. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I mean, I think they should have delayed spring training, but they haven't. So baseball is here. So here we are, once more onto the breach.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's get into that because you mentioned, why are we doing spring training? I'm sure we all noticed our country remains in the midst of a pandemic, and yet it feels like so much of the league is just sort of moving ahead as if business as usual. What are your feelings about that? I mean, are you confident the season's going to go off without a hitch, or why do you think it is that they're approaching things the way that they are?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to go off without a hitch, but I would, given that they made it through last year, and I was incredibly skeptical about that. I was, I thought there was like 0% chance. Or no, I think I tabbed it at like 10% chance they would make it through the year. And like, look, it's a credit to the players and the staffers and the coaches and, all those guys for like holding the line. And, Major League Baseball changed their protocols to make it, more proactive to get, so they got through the season. But I think we are being short-sighted if we think it's going to look, at the very least, the first couple months of the season, if we think it's going to look any different than the issues that the NBA, the NHL, and the NFL have had, over the fall and winter. I mean, it's just very difficult to avoid catching this thing when you're out and about and traveling. So, yeah, I mean, and as far as the delay, like, the players, their number one goal was getting 162 games worth of salary, after getting their salaries chopped into like basically a third last year. And that's understandable. And the owners, would only offer that in a delayed scenario if the players were willing to accept a variety of proposals that they did not want. So like they weren't going to trade the universal DH for expanded playoffs just to, shorten the season and get paid, for the 162 for 154. And so, look, the union and the commissioner's office, don't really have a constructive relationship. They probably shouldn't have a constructive relationship given, it's a labor battle, but there's no real ability to, creatively solve this problem, I guess. And so here we are. So spring training has begun and, hopefully people will get through it, without having too many outbreaks.
Yeah. And we'll get into some Dodger specific stuff in a moment. I'm curious to hear just sort of the offseason is wrapping up. We're about to be done with the offseason. If you step back and think big picture, look big picture, not necessarily at any individual deals, but just kind of the overall landscape. Are there any takeaways or themes from this particular offseason that maybe change the way you think about future off seasons?
Hard to say. I mean, it does make the winter after 2019 look like more of an outlier rather than a harbinger of, more spending. But I think we won't really have a good sense of, where this year fits on the trend of spending until after next year, because, I think teams are going to probably, if they're, we'll learn more if teams have played a full season where they maybe have a little bit more revenue from getting fans in the stands and getting the bigger playoff sort of, money, whatever, when they get more money for hosting playoff games, right? That's like a good thing. We didn't have that this year. So, I mean, players had a rough winter. I mean, I think good players were available for very reasonable prices. I mean, I think lots of guys took pay cuts after playing pretty well last year. I think like on the high end, the top end, like Real Muto did just fine. Bauer got what he wanted. George Springer got the deal he wanted. LeMahieu got the deal he wanted. But like, as you go down, it's like, I think there was 10 guys 2 winters ago who got more than 55 million, and there was like 5 this year. And I don't think that was totally related to the quality of player. So yeah, it's, it was a tough winter for players. I don't know how much of that was related to the pandemic, how much of that is just owners holding the line. It's impossible to know without the books being open. But yeah, it's not encouraging if you're in the union and trying to raise the average annual value of salaries.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's an interesting point, right? Because like you said, this offseason owners could cry poor and, hey, we didn't have all this, we lost revenue, blah, blah, blah. So maybe to your point, we do have to wait a couple of years to make a fair judgment. But along the lines of what you're saying, I mean, I was looking up at team salaries. So according to Spot Track, we've got 4 teams with a payroll under $50 million, I believe, 12 teams with a payroll under $100 million. There's a lot of talk about how problematic this is. And it was interesting when Bauer did sign that there were some people saying, hey, you can complain about the Bauer $45 million a year, whatever. But the bigger problem is that there's a bunch of teams who only pay that amount for an entire roster. So from your perspective, you kind of get to look at baseball not at one fan base, but from the big picture. How big of a problem is teams that don't spend for Major League Baseball? And do you have any ideas of how you would fix it?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a problem. I think I would, I guess, disincentivize tanking. I mean, part of the issue is that the changes that have been made in the CBA have limited ways for teams to spend money on players who aren't on the big league roster. So a team like the Pirates, for example, 10 years ago, and this isn't necessarily what the Pirates did, but this is a thing that they have open to them, is they could spend tons of money in the draft. It would just be uncapped, But now with the hard slotting system, you just have a limited amount of money. So it's, the owners want this. Like, this is the system the owners want. They don't mind this system. If they minded it, they would sell.
Yeah.
So what would I do? I mean, disincentivize tanking. So reward team, like I would get rid of the second wild card. I would make it so that you really get rewarded for going to the playoffs. I would make it so that it was an 8-team tournament instead of a 10-team tournament, and it's going to become a 14-team tournament. It's, like, that's not going to increase spending. That's just going to incentivize team to spend less and just get into the tournament. I would, I would dock draft picks if you finish, in 5th place 3 years in a row. I don't know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, smarter people than me, like, think about this more in depth, but my one main issue is like the expansion of playoffs. I just think it's so obviously going to have a negative effect on the sport, and no one cares.
Yeah.
The players don't care, the owners want it. It's like, okay, well, whatever, it's your sport. I just work here.
Yeah. No, I mean, that the expanded playoffs is the one that makes me say, I wish I could just sit down with Rob Manfred and maybe Tony Clark as well, and just say, like, do you guys care at all about the fans? Because I just, like, that's one issue where I just don't understand the upside. Now, I'm a Dodger fan, so maybe that's me being somewhat biased because, like, I'm expecting my team to be finishing in 1st or 2nd in the division and not needing the extra wild card spot to get in. But yeah, it doesn't feel like the fans are at the heart of what the owners or even the Players Association, more so the owners, though, I think are really after when they come to the table with this kind of thing.
Well, yeah, of course not. We can be grown-ups about this. They don't care.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know. Of course they don't care about the fans. The owners want to make money.
Yeah.
And the union wants to make money for their constituents. That's their job. The idea of like growing the game, which is like should be the commissioner's job, but it isn't. And the commissioner works for the owners. That's his job. And we're all grown-ups and we can acknowledge this. This idea that there should be a steward of the game, like you look at, it's not a real thing, and it's not how the sport has ever functioned. So this idea that either side why would either side think in terms of growing the game when that just presents opportunities for the other side to just take stuff away from them, I guess.
Yes, good point.
So it's, it's a labor battle. I mean, it's capitalism. It is what it is.
Well, let's get into some Dodger talk, and we'll start with the big headline. Your thoughts on Trevor Bauer, and maybe more specifically as a guy who's been around this clubhouse in the past. What do you think about the Trevor Bauer, the player, and then Trevor Bauer as a fit within the Dodger sort of organization and clubhouse?
Sure. As a player, there is a lot to like about Bauer as a player, even irrespective of the guy he was in 2020. I think he's a very solid third or fourth starter who could pick up innings and pitch well. So if that's the downside of the contract, that's not a player you want to pay $85 million over 2 seasons for, but he generally does stay healthy. And so in terms of floor, he has a pretty high floor. And the Dodgers believe that what he did in 2020 was real. And so that means he has an incredibly high ceiling. It's hard to say how real 2020 was, given that 7 of his starts were against like the Tigers, Pirates, and Brewers, who were 3 of the worst offensive teams in the sport. However, obviously he looked very good against Atlanta. So, we'll see. But I think most likely he will probably be pretty good with the Dodgers. They tend to do a good job with starting pitchers. He is obviously very passionate about his craft. They're going to set him up to succeed. He'll be the number 3 in the rotate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now that could lead to some issues. The clubhouse stuff, who knows? Who knows how his personality is going to fit? And to be honest, it's going to be very difficult for reporters to know this year because the clubhouse is not going to be open to us. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to have candid conversations with guys. It's hard to ask over a Zoom call, hey, what do you think of this guy? And then be like, oh yeah, he's a big jerk. Not that they would necessarily say that, but it doesn't lead to very candid conversations. How's he going to fit in the room? I have no idea. Probably fine. He's a baseball player. He's made it this far without causing too much drama with his teammates. I mean, there's been incidents over the years. He didn't get along with Miguel Montero. He threw the ball from Terry Francona. I just think his behavior on social media is very tedious and tiresome, and his sort of either inability or refusal to seriously consider how dunking on people can affect those people, I think is just it's just very tedious. And the less I have to think about one man's social media output, the better. So I there will probably be a few instances of things like that over his time in LA, but for the most part, he's probably going to be a really good pitcher. And the Dodgers obviously care more about that than they do about all the, Twitter bullshit.
Yeah. No, I get it. Well, let's switch gears to a guy that people probably have a easier time thinking and talking about, which is Justin Turner. I mean, was the offseason as it relates to Justin Turner as simple as it kind of looks looking backward now? I mean, it
wasn't simple at all. It wasn't simple at all.
So tell me about it.
Yeah. I mean, for me, so I thought it was going to be very similar to how the Dodgers dealt with Clayton Kershaw a few years ago, when he opted out of his contract, but never made it to free agency. It was just look, make me a fair offer. I'm coming back. We don't need to we don't need to waste time here. They offered him 3 years, $93 million. He may have been able to get more on the market. He could have held out for more. And he took it, and it was over by November 10th. Turner wanted to explore what his market was. And, he has I think just his age really played against him. I think if he were 32, he could have gotten something similar to what DJ LeMahieu got, but he's 36, and 36-year-old guys just don't get 4-year contracts, even ones who are as good a hitter as he is. Yeah. And so I think it's perfectly within his right to try and seek the best deal for him and, his wife. This is a business. It's totally fine. And the Dodgers did what kind of I thought they were going to do and didn't budge off their number. And, they probably have internal valuations of him, maybe, somewhere below 34 million a year, or excuse me, 17 million a year. But whatever, pay extra. He's a great player. He can help you win another title in, 2021. And, they can afford it. So I think if if he had signed that deal on November 20th, I would have been like, yeah, of course. What else was going to happen?
Yeah.
He wanted to test the market and he found his answer, and it's like, it's hard for the best 36. I mean, Nelson Cruz took a pay cut this winter.
Yeah.
Nelson Cruz has just mashed baseball year after year after year. He took a pay cut. Not only didn't get a multi-year deal, took a pay cut. So that's the market that greeted Justin Turner. But I think in the end, he got a fair deal and hopefully, both sides are happy with it.
Well, and he ended up with a raise. Weirdly enough, out of all this, he went from 16 million a year to 17 million a year.
I mean, he's a great hitter.
Yeah.
He has been so good for them. He's been the guy who shows up every October. They should pay a premium to have that bat in their lineup when game 1 starts next year.
Yeah. Okay. We know the Dodger rotation is stacked. I talked to Eno Saris, a colleague of yours, last week and, kind of asked, hey, is this one of the best rotations of the past few decades? And he sort of off the top of his head said, yeah, I don't really know who else is in that conversation. We know the lineup is stacked. They've got 3 of the top 15-ish players in baseball, plus Smith, Turner, Muncy, et cetera. I think when Dodger fans, if they had to pick a weak spot, and again, if you had to pick a weak spot, many point to the bullpen. And the reason simply is because Dodger fans can't look at the bullpen and say, here's the rock star, here's the closer, here's Kenley Jansen from 3 years ago. I'm curious, as somebody who has been around baseball, who's looking at a big picture, is that an issue for you? Do you think a team needs one dominant guy in their bullpen? And what would you kind of say to Dodger fans that are worried about a bullpen that realistically has been pretty great for the past 5 to 7 years?
I think it depends on, is the concern for over the regular season or the postseason? Because over the regular season, the bullpen's perfectly fine. This is it's a good bullpen. They'll be just fine. They got lots of dudes. They have a ton of depth. Gonsolin and May will probably eat some innings. Trinan should be fine. We'll see kind of what Jansen has to offer. I think the idea that you don't have a closer, or you don't have at least 1 or 2 guys who you can really trust and leverage, that matters in October. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You want your manager to know what he wants to do. You want him to have a script of okay, so when we get to the last 6 outs, these are the guys we want. Yeah. So, but the Dodgers have that guy. It's Julio Urias. He will be their closer in the postseason.
Yeah.
That is what, especially with Trevor Bauer on the roster, Julio Urias will close for the Dodgers this postseason.
One of the things with Urias is obviously we've seen him in the bullpen. Obviously he was huge in game 7 of the NLCS, game 6 of the World Series. I forget which one of those. It might have been game 6 of the World Series where he didn't strike anybody out. He got 7 outs or 9 outs or whatever it was without striking anybody out. And so a lot of people saw those 2 performances and just penciled him in. Hey, this guy's, a dominant reliever, and I'm not taking anything away from Urias, but it sounds like you're pretty confident that he has what it takes to be a dominant end of game pitcher.
Yeah. He's done it. They literally just won the World Series when he was the guy on the mound. And he's a good starting pitcher.
Right.
So it stands to reason that if you are a good starting pitcher and you have the makeup and mindset to survive in high leverage situations, you will be a good reliever.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. It'd be better if he missed more bats, but if he missed more bats and threw more strikes, he'd be a number 1 starter. But you just have to settle for the fact that he's a number 3 to number 4 starter, who would probably pitch game 1 for a lot of potential playoff teams. He just, there's players ahead of him. And so what do you do with that guy? You use him in the leverage spots. And, that can be whether some games it'll be, starting. I'm sure he'll start once or twice if they go on a deep run in the postseason. But when it comes down to those big situations, like game 7 last year and game 6, he will probably be the guy on the mound.
Okay. Couple questions from our viewers and then a couple rapid fires and we'll be out. Alejandro wants to know, Clayton Kershaw, your prediction 2022 and beyond. Is there a realistic chance that Kershaw leaves Los Angeles and pitches elsewhere? Is there a realistic chance he retires? How would you predict this situation to play itself out?
Yeah, I think all three scenarios are in play. But I would guess that he'll be back with the Dodgers, on a 1 or 2 year deal. But we'll see. I mean, I thought, Jorge Castillo, my former colleague at the Times, I thought did a really good job. He hung out with Kershaw at his house, earlier this winter, and yeah, there's a lot pulling him back towards Texas, whether that's to retire or whether it's to go play for the Rangers. I don't see him playing for the Rangers. I mean, he likes Chris Woodward, and Chris Woodward's, was very well liked when he was with the Dodgers. So, that to me feels like the least likely outcome. I would suspect that he'll probably take a 1 or 2 year deal and come back, but we'll see. I mean, I thought that his free agency a couple years ago would be more contentious, and it was pretty cut and dried. Like, I want to stay here. Let's get this done. And I think that there will be motivation to do that again. So I would bet he'll be back. But do I see him pitching for the Dodgers in 5 years? That's harder to see. Harder to see. I think this man has done the things he intended to do.
Yeah.
And his family's very important to him. He wants to be there with his children. And I would imagine his body really hurts. And he probably just wants to chill. But I don't know. I mean, he is not wired like normal human beings. And I don't mean that as an insult. You don't become a player of his stature if you are capable of being lazy. So I'm curious to see how he reacts to this coming season when the number one goal, the thing that has been animating him for the past decade of winning a World Series, has been accomplished, whether he feels the same sort of, burning sort of passion to reach that goal. Maybe he probably will. I have no idea, but it'll be interesting at the very least.
Totally. Okay. Another Dodger that's been around for a while, Kenley Jansen. And again, you've been around this team. I'm sure you've interacted with Kenley a little bit. He got removed from the closer role in the postseason, sort of. I mean, depending on how you want to interpret it. But if that happens permanently, I think there's been kind of whispers around like, man, how would that go if the Dodgers did either just go to a closer by committee or even just put Blake Treinen there, or Corey Knebel there, or Victor, whoever. How do you see the Kenley Jansen situation playing out? It's his last year. He's making a ton of money. He's been good, but not great. So how do you see Kenley Jansen playing out?
It's a challenging one because you're right. I mean, it would be easier if he had like a 6 ERA,
right?
But he still is like a perfectly fine middle reliever. If you just took away the name on the back of his jersey.
Exactly.
I mean, I think it is difficult. It's one of the real challenges ahead for Dave Roberts is kind of figuring out what is the best way to use him. I think that they would be doing, unless he really turns back the clock and looks like he did in 2017, I think they would be doing themselves a disservice if they went into the postseason with him still lined up as their closer. And as you remember, when they went into the 2020 playoffs, he was still closing games.
Totally.
And that was something that happened in the course of the postseason, that he was moved in and out. So I think that they would be doing themselves. I think that they have a full season to figure it out where he fits in terms of the leverage and to figure out who, is ahead of him in the hierarchy. But, a lot of this just depends on how he pitches. If he looks like he did a couple years ago, give him the ball. He was the best reliever in baseball from like 2015 to 2017, during that period of time. So like, if he can recapture that, go for it. But we'll see. It's a challenge for Dave Roberts, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, Jansen, I think is interesting too, because when you look at some of the StatCast numbers, there's actually really good numbers there. I think like exit velocity, that kind of stuff. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. And so there's a lot more to it than that. I'm not arguing that Kenley Jansen is who he was 4 or 5 years ago. But to your point, it is interesting. I think he gets crushed by 2017 Kenley Jansen more than sort of reality, I think, of how good or how not good he has been of late. So he's an interesting one for sure.
Sorry. No, go for it.
Okay. Last question. This is from Arturo. He asks, obviously Tatis just signs this massive extension. Dodger fans immediately ask, is there any chance for a pre-free agency extension with Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, or Walker Buehler? In your estimation, do any of those guys, I mean, to me, it seems like Bellinger may be the most likely because he's got the least injury concerns, and sort of you could see him playing out for the next 8 to 10 years, although the shoulder maybe is.
I mean,
the bigger
Bellinger's
issue
the only
there.
one who's had an operation in the past,
True.
12 years. Now that Corey Seager's back from that phase where he was like the episode of The Simpsons where Bart just keeps coming up with new maladies.
Right.
It's like the glasses and the hair. Yeah, I don't know. I do not foresee the Dodgers doing with Cody Bellinger what the Padres have done with Fernando Tatis. I think great for Tatis. That contract is somewhat insane for San Diego to give out to a pre-arb player who's played 140 games, but hey, it's not my money. And I think the Dodgers are not in a position where they feel like leveraged to do that. I think they're going to play it out. Unless Walker Buehler comes to them and says, hey, I want to do the James Shields deal from 2008. It's 7 years, $56 million. They're not going to, I think they're just going to take this year by year,
Yeah.
And, so that may mean that Corey Seager leaves this winter, and maybe he's replaced by, Trevor Story. Maybe he's replaced by Francisco Lindor. Maybe he's replaced for a year by Marcus Semien. Who knows? I mean, but I think they're gonna go to market with all these guys unless these guys are willing to take some sort of discount. At least right now. I mean, we'll see. They just put $85 million on the payroll over the next 2 years. That's a huge expenditure. Huge expenditure. So they can say all they want that this doesn't affect, bringing back Kershaw, that it doesn't affect what they're going to do at shortstop. That's $85 million that they don't have to spend now. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Dodgers probably don't have to worry about some of the things that a team like San Diego does. Like if a guy like Tatis is in San Diego and becomes a free agent, maybe there's the appeal to go somewhere else. I mean, if you're the Dodgers, you just sort of feel like you're not going to leave here to go win somewhere else. You're not going to leave here to get to a better market or a bigger city to go somewhere else. So maybe they feel like in free agency, they can be, they don't have any sort of a disadvantage where some of these other teams might feel that way.
Well, here's the thing that I don't like about the Tatis deal. The Padres have 3 seasons with Blake Snell and Yu Darvish, right?
Yeah.
They need, in my opinion, and no one cares about my opinion.
We do. We have you on because we care about your opinion.
I would say that their number one animating question right now should be, how do we win a World Series in these next 3 seasons? And given the roster that they already have and the fact that Fernando Tatis is not going anywhere in these next 3 seasons or making a particularly large amount of money, at least for the next 2, is you'd want to stay as flexible as possible during that time period. So you can add at the deadline. So you can be there when the Cubs are like, hey, we'll just give you Yu Darvish. And you'd be like, yeah, we'll take Yu Darvish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how locking up Tatis for 14 years makes it easier for them to win in the next 3 seasons. And it's also if you play through this year and you offer Fernando Tatis this coming winter, when you have another year of data on him, his health, who he is as a player, because he's obviously awesome, right?
Yeah.
He's played 140 games though. That's not a lot of games.
Yeah.
You have another year of data, where you are with your various prospects, with your Mackenzie Gores, with your CJ Abrams. You're just a year further down the road, and you decide you want to keep Fernando Tatis, right? And you offer him $325 million. He's going to turn that down. $330 million. He's going to take it, right? So I don't know why do it now when I'm not exactly sure how they benefit from doing it now. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of a contrarian by nature. And so I try and think about these things in a way that's other than wow, the Padres, that's, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. That was just my thought is they have a 3-year window where they really want to maximize what they can do at the deadline and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know how this, I think I can see ways in which this just makes it tougher to be as flexible, but I could be wrong. We'll see. I don't know.
Well, and your colleague Ken Rosenthal had a great piece. I think it was either last night or today, just talking about, let's not forget that the Padres aren't exactly in the biggest market. They've got a TV deal that's signed for the next, 7 years already. So it's not like there's this huge necessarily cash flow coming into San Diego to help them, make sense of this. And it's not, the owners, can make their own decisions. The owner is different than the city of San Diego, but I just thought it was an interesting perspective about a team like San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, I texted Ken last night when we were trying to figure out what to write. I said Tatis is going to look lovely in pinstripes in 2025, which is like a joke, but like that's kind of what happens with these deals a lot of times. I hope it doesn't, for the sake of the people of San Diego and for Fernando Tatis if he wants to live in, San Diego for a long time. It's a lovely city. But yeah, I mean, I think like there's and Ken like got is getting ripped on the internet for that column, and it's just like. He's not arguing that that this was like a bad decision in a vacuum. What he's saying is like, let's see if the owner actually continues to behave this way.
Right.
It's like it's actually putting the pressure on the owner to honor the contract. But that's whatever. Reading comprehension is what it is.
Yeah, no, I get it. Okay, couple rapid fire questions. Again, you've been gracious with your time, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Biggest surprise for you this offseason? Could be a surprise deal, maybe that
Dodgers signing Trevor Bauer. Signing Trevor Bauer. At that number, that was like I never would have seen the Dodgers signing Trevor Bauer at that number.
Okay. Favorite move that a team in baseball made this offseason?
Favorite move. The Rays signing Rich Hill for $2.5 million. That's great.
My co-host has been lobbying for the Dodgers to re-sign Rich Hill as the lefty relief pitcher out of the bullpen all off season. So
Rich Hill's a perfect fit for the Rays because he was watching that game with Blake Snell and he was like, wow, they let him pitch the fifth.
Right. Exactly. He's going to be thrilled to get through the lineup twice. He's not going to complain about the third time.
What do you mean I'm allowed to face the hitters for a third time? That's crazy. You can't, Rich's, man. There are so many instances during Rich's time. Well, there's really just three, but playoff games where you're like, why is Rich coming out of this game right now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of other moves that I liked. I don't know. What do you like? What do you got? I'm trying to think.
We spent a ton of time just thinking about the Dodgers. I mean, I like the Corey Knebel move. If I'm the Dodgers, I think those types of moves.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, honestly, I think Darvish for the Padres was a great move.
Sure.
It's hard not to love something like that a team that,
I like
that. If you're the Cardinals, you like the Arenado move probably. So
sure. I liked that trade more for San Diego than I did the Snell trade. I think obviously like in the Snell trade, the Padres are getting the best player in the deal. However, I do think they gave up a decent amount of prospects, especially. But I think that was like more of a fair deal in that like it sucks that the Rays, feel like they have to operate that way. But like they kind of did okay. I mean, I feel like what Cleveland got back from Lindor was kind of similar. It's like, I hate that you're making this move, but I actually like, I don't know, you kind of got some decent stuff back. Like, I think that's okay. It's like, I wish that this wasn't how you thought was the best move for your team, but like, I like the things you got back. I mean, I don't know. Like I thought, like, I think like the market is so weird. Like, I don't understand why, like Rich Hill gets $2.5 million and Chris Archer gets 6.5. Like, I have no idea why those two numbers were what happened. Like, I don't know why, like, Drew Smiley gets like 11 million. But I don't know. I who knows? I mean, like, no one knows how pitching works. Like, I like the Giants getting Anthony DeScalafani. I think he'll pitch well for them. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about, if you couldn't already tell. And no one does. Anyone who pretends they tell, no one knows. We'll see. They're going to play a whole season, and then we'll all talk about how we all saw it coming. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, couple more. So is there a guy on the Dodgers that you think you might like more than sort of the average person heading into the 2021 regular season? Is there a guy you're high on? No, just like a guy that you're high on. You think he's going to have a good year that maybe people aren't talking about, or that may have just sort of slipped under the radar kind of thing?
I think Mookie Betts is going to be very good for them this year.
Like that.
I don't know.
Did you hear? I'll give you a controversial thing because you mentioned Mookie Betts. Do you want to wade into the Mookie Betts or Juan Soto, who's the best right fielder in baseball debate that kind of captured Twitter and then?
I don't know. I'd have to look. I mean, I'd have to look. I mean, Juan Soto's really good at hitting, but Betts is a more complete player.
Yeah,
and also awesome at hitting. But Juan Soto is really good at hitting. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think it's hard because, with Mookie Betts, and I'll say this as a Dodger fan, the biggest piece of his game that I have underappreciated from afar is his base running. And I wouldn't even, you could have talked to me 18 months ago and I wouldn't have even included base running in a conversation about, who are the best players in baseball. And then I watched Mookie Betts play and I've told it, like, opening day, the Dodgers, the game winning run was scored on a ground out to the infield that Mookie Betts scored on. I mean, and then he goes and does it to win Game 6 of the World Series. So it's little pieces of the game like that. He's stealing bases that it just, I've never seen a player that approaches the game on the bases the way that he does, to where I actually have been convinced that base running should seriously be in the conversation of who the best player in baseball is, who the best, whatever is. And so, I'm biased on that, but I just think it's funny to me because, and I don't blame people that put out these lists, do what you want to do, but it was funny to have one guy say Mookie Betts is the second best right fielder. And then, the next group of people did top 10 players in baseball and 2 of the 4 had Mookie Betts is better than Mike Trout. And so, which to me, that is crazy. So,
wouldn't go there just yet. I mean, Soto's a better hitter.
Yeah,
I don't
for
think
sure.
I don't think it's really worth debating that. But Betts is such a complete baseball player, as you said. I mean, Soto's not much of a defender, and Betts is a plus defender. Betts is a great runner. Soto's not much of a runner. I guess I would take Betts, but man, it would really stink to be on the other end where you get Juan Soto. I don't know. They're both awesome.
Totally.
They're both awesome.
I hear you.
It's hard to decide.
I hear you. Okay, last one. Do the Dodgers win the division? If so, how many games?
4.
Okay. Perfect.
4.
So a little close. You're not going with some of these projection systems that have it like a 7 to 9 game spread. I mean, not that that's that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
I think San Diego's the second best team in the sport.
Yeah.
I think they're, they got a lot of, obviously, like Snell and Darvish. That's great. But I think adding, Kim, bringing back Profar, they've bolstered the bullpen. Like they've got a really good roster. I don't think it's as good as the Dodgers, but I think they're going to give them a real run for their money this year. I really do.
Awesome. Well, that's Andy McCullough of The Athletic. Again, he's a senior writer over there. Check out his stuff. If you're not already subscribed to The Athletic, it's amazing baseball coverage. So, Andy, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you joining us, and enjoy the last couple of weeks of the off season before the regular season starts.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.